Apparently, because Windcrest Police Department got low reviews on Google, Freeman decided to go down to the police station and be an ass. First stop is with this gentleman who is there paying a fine for a junk vehicle. They do want you to know exactly what, why, and how, which is why Windcrest, Texas puts definitions and procedures and authority to enforce and all the other fun stuff up for you to see. James claims that they don't want you to know what's going on, and they do. James also is incredulous that a city would enforce what or how you use your property. Well, this may come as a surprise to James, but neighbors having junk cars rotting in their front lawns lowers property values. And homeowners aren't big fans of having their property values lowered. There's a reason for these things. Imagine this, because James can't fathom this, but imagine a situation where someone decided that they would allow a nuclear waste company to dump nuclear waste onto their property, and they're your next door neighbor. Are you telling me that the state should be able to control what they do on their own property? It's their property. They should get to use it however they want. Who is the state to come in there and say that they can't dump radioactive material on their property? He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the consequences of these things. And yeah, it can get down to a point where it's a minor thing. Like, they also, let's see, health, is it in this one? Unsanitary conditions. So you have to keep your lots and premises zoned R1 and R2 free of weeds, grass, and other vegetation except trees and shrubbery in excess of 10 inches. Blah, blah, blah. Zone B1 and B2 shall be kept free of weeds, grass, and other vegetation. Blah, blah, blah. They have all these unsightly and unsanitary premises. You have to keep your area clean. There are reasonable people can reasonably disagree as to what level that this arises to. But it negatively impacts your neighbors if you live like a pig. And Freeman doesn't understand that. I guess because Freeman just wants, I don't know, in his happy little place, in his voluntarist place, he thinks that everybody is a good person and everybody's going to do the right thing. But James himself can't be bothered to do the right thing. So it's pretty obvious that his dreams are going to fail. Now, as far as what a junked vehicle is, a junked vehicle is defined. So there are three things that it has to be. Or actually two things. One is it has to be wrecked, dismantled, or partially dismantled or discarded. That's one. Or it has to be inoperable and has remained inoperable for more than 72 consecutive hours if the vehicle is on public property, or 30 consecutive days if the vehicle is on private property. So it has to either be wrecked, dismantled, partially dismantled, or discarded, or it has to be, since in this case it was on private property, inoperable for more than 30 consecutive days. 30 consecutive days is a long time. If your car breaks down and you want to fix it in your driveway, no big deal. You got 30 days to do it. If you haven't fixed your car in 30 days, well, then there may be issues. However, there's one other condition. This subchapter applies only to a motor vehicle that displays an expired license plate or does not display a license plate. So even if your vehicle is broken down in your driveway for 30 consecutive days, as long as it has a valid license, I'm assuming that means tags, then you're good. They give you a lot of leeway. So he got his vehicle running. Great. This guy did. He claims that it wasn't wrecked or it wasn't a junk car, but you got to remember they've defined it. So it just has to be wrecked, dismantled, or partially dismantled, or discarded, or it has to be inoperable and has remained inoperable for more than 30 consecutive days. He says it was operable, then it must have been wrecked, dismantled, or partially dismantled or discarded. Now, you're going to say to yourself, gosh golly, I mean, shouldn't there be something like a hearing on this? And in fact, there is. So we're going to go back down to junked vehicles, procedures for abating a nuisance. Any citizen or city official may file a complaint with the city secretary. So who filed the complaint? Was it his neighbor? For the maintenance of a public nuisance in violation of this article. Upon receipt of such a complaint, the city secretary may issue a notice. It's a notice whereupon such public nuisance exists, stating the nature of the public nuisance, that it must be removed and abated within 10 days from the receipt of the notice. The notice shall further state that a request for a public hearing may be made. If he wanted to, if he actually was responsive and complied with it, he could have had a public hearing to determine whether or not it actually was a public nuisance, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they lay it all out. It's all there. It's all there for you in black and white. Obviously, I'll leave links to it. But it's ridiculous. Freeman doesn't think about what he's doing when he's talking about stuff like nuisances, having junk vehicles on your property. Basically, every city has it. You get out in the country and they don't care as much. Again, the value of the land doesn't come from how it looks, but the value of the land comes from what you can grow on it, what you can produce on it. So having a junk vehicle doesn't really matter as much. But in towns and in cities where the value of your property is judged based on the value of similar homes in the neighborhood. If you've ever had your house appraised, you know about this. They'll look at similar homes in the neighborhood to see what they kind of sold for. And they'll use that to make a best guess as to what your home is actually worth. And they'll also look and they'll see if there are junk cars around, which lowers property values. They'll see if people aren't maintaining their lawns, which lowers property values. They'll see if people aren't maintaining their houses around you. If there's a problem neighbor whose gutters are broken and fallen off and they never clean up their yard and there's baby diapers just strewn about their porch, it's going to lower your property values. That's going to negatively affect the value of your house. It makes sense when you actually understand the pieces and put them together rather than just holding up each individual piece and say, see, this is because the government hates us and just wants our money. $495 might seem like a lot, but how much does it cost them to do all these things, to pay the people, to have the buildings, to send out these notices, to et cetera, et cetera? These things can be pricey. I don't think that Windcrest is making a windfall. And considering that he could have just abated the nuisance without any issue at all, or never had it in the first place, all he had to do was have a fence around it so they can't see it. Look, it's detrimental to the safety and welfare of the public. It tends to reduce the value of private property. It invites vandalism. It creates a fire hazard. It's an attractive nuisance. Attractive nuisance just means that like kids will think, oh, I could go there and play in the car and get hurt. Produces urban blight adverse to the maintenance and continuing development of municipalities and is a public nuisance. So they say, where do they say in here somewhere? Yeah, so it can be So valid defenses are it's maintained in an orderly manner, it's not a health hazard, and it's so you have to have maintained in an orderly manner and not a health hazard, and screened from ordinary public view by appropriate means, including a fence, rapidly growing trees, or shrubbery. So, I mean, he's just being silly. The guy paid a fine he didn't have to pay. And then he complains that he got a ticket by the same cop for running a red light or something like that immediately afterwards. Well, but he doesn't say whether he ran the red light or not. And then Freeman comes back to make a fool out of himself, trying to ID this corporal who came out of a secured police area. I mean, he's just being, at this point, Freeman is just being a jackass for the sake of being a jackass. He's wasting taxpayer time and money. This guy could have been doing police work, but he wastes this guy's time to ask a stupid question. And then he goes out into the parking lot and he handwrites. Look at that. Oh my God. He handwrites citations, goes back in, wastes more time handing this guy his citations. How retarded is that? What rights has he defended there? He's shown he doesn't understand how property values work, and he's just been an asshat. Who's going to watch this and say, oh my gosh, those police are so terrible. That police officer was really patient and really kind. And to be honest with you, James probably knows that it's their policy that they have to be respectful, even when citizens are being douchebags. If you're wondering why Freeman hasn't been beat to a pulp yet, it's because it is their policy. I guarantee you it's their policy to be polite and respectful, even when the public is being a douche. And in this case, Freeman was being a douche. He gained nothing. He did nothing. It's nonsense. It's clickbait. I have one apologist for all the bad behaviors in my Discord server, just defending this all to death, and it's retarded. James Freeman is a bad person, and he should feel bad for what he did.